Hi, stock explorers. Welcome to Explaining Stocks to 5-Year-Olds. Today I'm joined by Katrina Dudley, a portfolio manager at Fraklin Templeton Investments and the author of Undiversified, The Big Gender Short in Investment Management. Katrina, thank you so much for being here today.
Great, thanks for having me.
To kick it off, I would love to know what inspires you to get into investing.
I grew up in a family that was a real estate heavy family. So I tell the story of my father, who only has ever bought one stock in his life, and that offer came in the telephone bill, and he bought the stock of Telstra. So I really didn't have it growing up, but my dad was an entrepreneur, and he ran businesses. He ran real estate related businesses. So I always liked that idea of running something and being involved in creating value. I went to school. I did a degree in accounting and I have a finance degree. And I wanted to get that ability to kind of act and think like the owner of a business and to be able to do that in a way that was somewhat different from actually doing what my dad did. And that's where stock investing came in. I look at where I am and where I landed at Mutual Series, and we take that long-term investment horizon. And when you're investing in companies with that longer-term investment horizon, you really need to act and think like the owner of the business, because you're not investing in that business for kind of that short-term pop or that new whiz bang product. You're looking at how they can sustainably create value over a long period of time. So for me, investing, I got into it a little bit by chance, but also because it kind of lets me balance having that entrepreneurial spirit and also being involved in the markets.
I think that's so fantastic. And that owner's view into a business is so key. I guess I'd love to know how you got your foot in the door. What was your first job? Things like that.
So my first job was actually in an accounting firm, and it was a hybrid job because they weren't able to create a full-time role for me. I started my career in valuations, and we would value businesses for the purposes of divorce. So it's a little morbid of a topic, but we'd value private companies when the owner was part of a family, and that family was being separated. And so I started doing that, and I really enjoyed the valuation side. I love trying to understand what was driving the business and how it impacted the value. I was able to transfer that up into our corporate finance division and did not just family law valuation, but valuation in multiple different circumstances, be it asset valuation, business valuation as well. And then I came over to the United States, and I did that as I continued to do valuation work. When I was doing that, I got involved in a really unique part of valuation work, and that was valuing it's something called a non-compete agreement, which I know most of the people on the podcast are not going to understand, but basically you pay someone not to destroy your business, and you value it by understanding how would you destroy the business if you could, if you were not prevented from doing that and you were kind of mean-spirited. And generally speaking, people aren't like that. So you have to really tease out what are the drivers, what could they do? Would it be stealing key employees? Would it be, replicating a product or replicating a distribution network? And so I used to do that, but in a historical sense. So when I got my MBA and came out of that, I wanted to know when I'd be able to continue having these interesting conversations about, what are the drivers of the business, where are the weaknesses, where are the strengths, and be able to do that in like a forward-looking sense. And that's what valuation, and that's what stock market investing is. You're taking a view on a company, you understand what's driving it, and you're saying to yourself, well, what will this business be worth in 5 years' time, and what am I paying for it today, or the current stock price? And is that gap big enough? And if it's big enough to give you enough return, you invest in the stock, and hopefully in 5 years' time it'll be worth what you think it's going to be worth. So that's how I got involved, and that's my career trajectory. I started working at Mutual Series over 20 years ago, and I'm still here today.
I think that's absolutely fantastic. And valuation is one of the key components of investing. It's probably a little bit more complex for our readers, but it is a key merit of why you pick a stock, why you
Mhm.
look to invest in it. So I just think that's absolutely great. I guess going back, rewinding to the version of Katrina in elementary school, what traits of your younger self do you think make you a successful investor today?
So if I go back to actually maybe not quite my elementary school days, because I think I tried a lot of things. I was one of those jack of all trades and masters of none, as my father would say. But I tried a lot of different things to see what would stick. And as I got older, I had a really difficult choice to make when I was in eighth grade. And that was in Australia, you specialize a lot earlier than you do in the United States. And I had to choose business or a career as a musician. So two very different paths. And I looked, and this comes back to the way I look at investing as well. So everything is kind of circular in your life. And I would remind people that it's funny how things just keep repeating. I looked at what my opportunity set and the chances of me being a successful musician and that probability. And it's a very low probability, even though the returns can be really, really big, versus being a business person where maybe the returns can't be so big, but there's a lot bigger and wider opportunity set and many more chances to be successful. And I went into business, and that's what I studied when I was in high school. But when I was in elementary school, I tried a lot of different things, and I encourage people to do that because that's how you find what you're interested in.
I think that's absolutely great. And your job as a portfolio manager, I think, is one of the most fascinating jobs in the investment industry. Could you explain to our audience members what a portfolio manager is and what you do?
Yeah. Um, it's a difficult job to explain. So, what happens is that we pull together lots of people's money, but it's not their play money, it's their retirement money. So, it's money that's going to help you provide for you in retirement. Or maybe it's the money that your parents have set aside to pay for your college expenses. Or maybe it's the money that your older sister who's just out of college is saving for a house and the deposit. So we take that pool of money and then we take that money and we invest it in stocks. And that's the portfolio manager is the person who is charged with selecting the stocks that go into the portfolio and make it up. So we have approximately 50 to 60 stocks that we own. And a stock is really just a part interest in a big business. So let's take a look at something everyone knows, because if you're kids, you probably know what McDonald's looks like. And you can buy a partial interest in the McDonald's business. And that partial interest, that's very small interest, is called a stock share. And we take a lot of those. And interestingly, that's how the term portfolio manager got constructed. And that's where it's derived from, because originally we used to own those ownership interests were represented by pieces of paper called a stock certificate. And we would have a folium or a portfolio of these stock certificates. So, everything comes back to the fact that we are looking at all those different stocks that we own. And as a portfolio manager, you can think of the stocks as being like the trees. And we're not just looking at the individual trees, we're also looking at what the forest looks like. And we're trying to look at that top level view as well as understanding each of the trees that make up the forest.
I think that's absolutely great. And it's a good visual for like the trees and the forest at large. Today, we're going to be talking about industries. So I was just curious, Katrina, what is your all-time favorite industry?
So I cover a non-traditional industry for a female investor, and it's where I kind of grew up. And I cover machinery stocks and industrial stocks. And it's a real challenge to explain it because we make the things that help people make the things you buy. So we're not doing it on the front line. So if you think of a pencil and you're writing away with your pencil and you went to the store and bought your pencil, and you've probably got one there or a pen, there we go. There's a machine that makes the components that make that pencil, and there's another machine that puts them together. And someone makes that machine that helps make the pencil, and they sell those machines to the pencil makers who then deploy them in their business. And we just do that across multiple different type of industries and factories. So we're selling people machines or things that help other people do something. We may be selling, if you look at a piece of equipment, when you go and look at the road being constructed, we may look at the company that makes, either the entire of the excavator that's digging up the road, or part of the componentry. So the things that make the shovel go up and down, that the fluid mechanics to do that. So it's really tough to explain to people because often you cannot see our product. But it's just a fascinating because we are really, the picks and shovels behind that gold rush. Without those picks and shovels, no one would be able to get the gold and be rich as they did in those gold rush periods. And we're buying the companies that make those picks and shovels.
I think that's fantastic. And industrials is like one of the most vast industries. Like it's very broad. There's a lot of different things that go into industrial. So I actually think that's pretty fascinating because you get to put your hands in a little bit of everything. And it's massive. So I guess just to break down industrials a bit more, there's several components within industrials. Would you mind breaking those down for the audience members today?
So there are 13 different sub-industries within industrials, of which one of them is called general industrials, aka a catch-all for everything that's not part of those one specific categories. So let's just look around the world as you see it today, and let's think about where you could find an industrial subsector. You could be looking at the outside the back of your local CVS, and you see this machine that's running and whirring with a fan, and that's what we call the HVAC system, or the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system that is keeping that store temperature at the right temperature. Particularly there, it's a key component because it's also making sure that all the pharmaceuticals that are stored within a CVS pharmacy are within their range of temperature. So that's one example of a sub-industry in which what we cover. If you went to an airport and you were taking off in an airplane to go and visit grandma, we cover the companies that make those airplanes or make the engines or make a subcomponent of those. So you're not personally ever going to buy an airplane yourself, but you will definitely run into our products if you're flying anywhere. So aerospace is another subcomponent of the industrial space. We've covered the HVAC. I talked about the construction equipment machinery. So if you are driving around and you see a road project, that's definitely another part. So there's a lot of just so many different segments. Think about if you were building a house or your parents are building a house, someone is selling you the components or the parts to make that house. They're selling you the roof tiles. They're selling you the timber that makes the frame. They're selling you the faucets that help the sink turn on. They're probably also selling you the sink and the countertop. So building products is another subset of the industrial space. But the key is that in all of these different subsects, a lot of the time you are not purchasing them directly. You're purchasing a house, you're not purchasing the components of the house. So that's the way to think about an industrial category, is to really think about what's making things work.
I think that's excellent. And a lot of those things that you just mentioned they're kind of necessities. Like you need an HVAC system, you need air, you need heat, you need all those things. So I think that's also, it kind of ties into how they make money, right? So to a large extent, that's like a driver behind how they're making money at the end of the day. Could you give us an example of how maybe a company within that sector makes money?
Look, let's just take a step back and just think, because I think that idea of companies need to make money is obviously a very important part of what we do in shareholder returns. What we're increasingly finding, however, is how you make that money and the sustain, whether you can keep making that money, and what successful factors do you need to have to ensure that you make money not only today, but you make it in the future. And so if you look at a lot of our companies, the real key is that they charge a price for their product. So you ring up, let's just talk about, we cover the Class 8 truck market. So those big trucks, let's take one of those, and you want to buy one. So there's a price, and you are willing as the truck owner to pay that price. I then have to go out and buy all the components to make up that truck and to assemble it. And then I have to pay for the labor and the people who are going to put that product together. And I also have to pay for a place for them to put it together. I have to make sure that I have the right insurance. So there's a lot of different costs, but what you want to do is make sure that that revenue number or the price that you're getting from your customer is greater than all of the costs, not just the direct ones and the ones you can see easily, but some, both the what we call the direct costs and then the indirect costs. And the indirect ones are the things that just make the business work. And there are things that are a little more boring. So it may be your workers' compensation insurance. It may be the cost of a receptionist who picks up the phone. It may be the cost of the HR person who does all the benefits for your employees. So that's what an indirect cost is. They're not making the product, but they're helping support the people who make the products. And so once you get that, you get a return, or you get, hopefully as we say, you want your revenues to be greater than your expenses. And that's what a profit is. So these companies make money by making sure they charge a price that is greater than their cost.
That's excellent. And I guess comparing this industry, which composes of several sub-industries, to all the other industries you could have picked, Katrina, why do you like industrials better than the other industries?
As a portfolio manager, I get exposure to all industries, so I get to hear different things. I like the industrials because of, as you the variation and the complexity of them. And the other thing is there's always something to do. So, for example, if you are often a retail analyst and we're going into a consumer, what we call slowdown, so your parents are going to spend less, you really don't want to own a retail stock like a Target or something, because their earnings are going down. So that profit number we talked about is going to come down because they're selling less goods. Within my space, however, if one subsector, so say all the airlines are buying less equipment, maybe the truck drivers are buying more trucks, that thing. So there's always something to do. And that's the reason I really enjoy it, is this idea that there's something to do. The second thing is that, look, everyone thinks of tech stocks. I know they are the darlings, and technology stocks are, the Microsofts, the Zooms, the Facebook, if your parents allow you to be on Facebook. But they're all those tech and the whiz bangs and that, and everyone thinks that's the great place to be. Well, my industrial companies are the next generation of tech stocks, because they're going to be doing such a wholesale change in how they work and the amount of technology. So thinking about that truck that we're looking at, over the next decade, that truck will become self-driving. So it will be able to operate without a driver. And that takes a lot of systems and integration, the same way a tech company does. And so I like that aspect, that it's exciting, at the same time that truck is going to have to become greener. And when I say greener, it has to emit less emissions. Maybe it needs to be battery operated. And so you've got this major transition that's going on as well. So there's just, for me, transition is excitement. It's new things. It's understanding how they impact the companies, how the companies go through that transition. So you asked why I like industrials. It is actually a really exciting industry, even though it can sound like such a boring place to be, but I just think it's exactly the opposite.
And there's so much power within the transformation that you just mentioned, and the key things that you've highlighted, like all of those things that you just said add to their value, or material to their valuation in some way. So that makes it more complex, but at the same time, as you said, more interesting. I guess going back to your younger self, what advice would you give your younger self about investing in this industry?
In terms of, every person has different things that work for them. And I think that one of the things I look at is, I wish I realized that people can't hear what you're thinking, so you need to speak up. And it's tough because, when you speak up and when you voice that thought out loud, I work with a lot of very smart people. You're subjecting yourself to them saying something different or questioning what you're saying. But if you don't say it, if you're not brave enough to speak up, no one is actually going to get the benefit of that. And that's what investing is all about. It is about having diversity and diverse opinions in the room. But just because you have diverse people, if those people don't feel safe and they're not speaking up and saying that and voicing those opinions, you're not going to get the benefit of that. So that's how I think about. I wish I just was better at speaking up because, as I said, they just can't hear what you're thinking.
I think that's excellent advice for everybody who's watching. And you have written this excellent book. I have it here because I'm a big fan. Undiversified. Sorry that the dust cover is off. I do that in my living room. But Undiversified, the big gender short in investment management. I would love to hear what inspired you to write this story and just, yeah, take it away.
Look, I think that I have been doing this for 20 years and I was, when I first started in this business, I was the only female in the business and now 20 years later I'm not. So we wrote the book to make a change and to make a difference. And what we did first is we debunked the myth that this is some job that's difficult, that you need to be some, quantum physicist math major. You need math skills equivalent to a 6-year old, the sixth grader, not quite 6-year old, but a sixth grader. So the math skills you need to be successful are not as people believe. We also really wanted to debunk this kind of Hollywood image that we have, we think has done so much disservice to finance in general. And this idea that, we're hard partying, we're, just that really, you think of the Wolf of Wall Street and everything. We're not that. We are a conservative industry. Number three, we wanted to teach people about the good that we do and the value we create for people because there is nothing that is more important to your parents and your grandparents and you when you're old enough to having a really well-rounded financial plan. And investment forms part of that financial plan in helping you meet your long-term goals, whatever they may be. And so we wanted to talk about that. So what we did is we debunked the industry, we debunked the myths, and then we talked about the supply chain and what everyone can do. And we really put out a challenge. So we put out a challenge to the people who, what we call the allocators. So, the pension, like the people who have your parents' retirement money or, the foundation at a university, we talk to them what they can do. We also talk to the investment management firms. So the companies like Fraklin that I work for, what they can do. But we put a challenge out to two more people. The first is people like myself. We wanted people like myself to be more visible and to talk more about what they do. And this is why we're really supportive of these types of events and these type of podcasts because they show how women can be successful in this field. And that role model is really important and the research supports that. But finally, it is the influencers. Everyone out there can make a difference. And we wanted to show how they could do that. So that was the rationale behind writing the book. We wrote it in a way that it is readable for someone in high school, but it's also relatable to someone who's maybe further along in their career. And so we've really tried to span that audience and make it a book that appeals to a broad audience of people who we'd like to encourage to come and work with us because we love what we do.
I think it's absolutely fantastic. My husband's an advisor, and there was younger college clients, and I recommended this book because they were like, "What should we read?" I'm like, "This book. You need to get Undiversified." So everybody listening, if you haven't read it, please go check it out. And Katrina, before we end, are there any last words of wisdom that you'd like to say to the audience today?
I think that investing is a phenomenal career. I really do want to emphasize that. We just do so much good in the work for which people just don't understand. I talked about the importance of a financial plan. You think about the role that we play in helping companies transitioning to a greener world and making the world better. And I just would encourage more, particularly girls and females, to come into the industry. We are a welcoming bunch and we'd love to have them here.
I completely agree. Thank you so much, Katrina. It was a pleasure having you today.
Thank you.